Greetings, everyone. I'm Eric Hansen. On behalf of everyone here at Ott.X, I'm delighted to welcome you to this episode of Ott.X's vidcast, The Buzz, where we offer up our online stage to a few of streaming industry's insiders to drop their version of the truth on us about what's going on, what it means, and what we should do about it in navigating the tumultuous waters of OTT streaming today. Before we turn things over to this episode's crew of Buzzketeers, I want to make sure to mention that you can find and subscribe to all episodes of The Buzz via podcast on Spotify. Just search for OTTX and be sure to follow us so you'll be notified about future episodes as well. We'll drop the Spotify link into the podcast in just a minute, so you'll be able to find it and get out there to get podcasting soon. All right, so presiding over today's panoply of pontificators, we're excited to welcome our moderator, Jennifer Kent, VP of Research at Parks Associates, along with our esteemed group of panelists, Bryan Crocker, Chief Operating Officer at Multicom Entertainment Group, Fred Godfrey, co-founder and Chief Executive Officer of Origin, and Marc Rashba, Executive VP of Partnerships at Cineverse. Welcome, y'all.
Thanks,
Good
Eric.
morning.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
All right,
Well,
so you ready to get things going here? There's
let's
nothing
do
going
it.
on in the streamosphere, is there? Like, I think it's pretty much
Yeah, nothing at
business
all,
as
especially
usual.
as we head into fall. We're in sports season, we're in politics season here in the US. So much going
Nothing to
on.
talk about at all. It's just about an hour of silence. All right, well, I'll let y'all go. Have a good time. I realize there's actually no chance of that with this group on the call. So have a great time. We'll see you in a little bit.
Awesome. Thanks, Eric. Thanks to the whole OTTX team for putting this on and getting this awesome group of folks together. So I thought that with NFL kicking off this weekend, we had to start with sports, which of course, when we think about everything driving a lot of the where the money is going and sort of the horse race and the different streaming and who's bidding for rights, et cetera. Sports is right at the top of the list. So I want to know, what are you guys watching this season when you think of it about sports, about football, when it comes to streaming, right? We've got kind of games all over the place. I know that Peacock had a special game this weekend on Friday featuring my birds, so go birds. But what are you looking for this season? What are you watching? Maybe I can start with Bryan here, and then y'all just go ahead and chime in.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Jennifer. So I'm an NFL fan. I'm from Boston, so I'm a Patriots fan. Unfortunately, they had a nice win this week, but we're not expecting the two good things of this season. So, but yeah, I mean, I'm waiting for the NBA season to start again. That's really my goal: get the Celtics to do a back-to-back for the first time in a long time. So that's what I'm excited about.
Awesome. Fred, Marc, what are you watching when it comes to streaming during the sports season? Did you catch any of the games this weekend?
Well, I guess, well, tough luck, Marc. I'll let you, say something more relevant. But as a Brit, I think I'm just waiting for everyone to start streaming the cricket. I think that's really, really important. It's a very interesting game that doesn't put people to sleep. That's really it for me. Otherwise, I'll say that in a decade I've lived here, I got a little bit into hockey. Otherwise, everything else I find difficult to understand, including in the football, where like people sort of stand around a lot and there's lots of breaks, but not a huge amount of playing always. So I probably just made some enemies. I apologize.
I don't know, Fred. The NFL spending millions of dollars to send games overseas regularly to get people like you more excited and interested in the game, because it's a bastardized version of rugby, essentially, I'm sure in your eyes. So
Yes. Yeah, we'll talk about that later.
But with respect to what we're watching, I don't know if it's streaming, but college football and professional football, that we wait all year. The Major League Baseball to me is just continues to be relatively dull until you get to playoffs, and even with the improvements. So this is the season. It's pretty exciting, but we have to get right to it because not all games are available to everybody, given what's happened of late, creating very frustrating experience, giving us a chance as people who work in the industry, a chance to really look at it from the consumer lens of what's the experience like when you go to put on a USC football game on your carrier and get a still screen that says, "Sorry, we're not going to be carrying the game," with no warning. So
Yeah, so let's just go right into the carriage disputes, right? So obviously terrible, for the subscriber, really challenging in the landscape of the folks that are still with pay TV, right? Or are taking on the vMVPDs that have a lot of these rights for the live channels. I was looking at our data here, about 20% of households now subscribe to the vMVPD service like Fubo, YouTube TV, Sling, Hulu Plus Live, right, where they might be catching some of these games. But yeah, the carriage disputes are really taking out some of those views. What's the end goal here, and how do you guys, see some of the the maybe power shifting here a little bit, right? The biggest one probably being Disney, and DIRECTV. Are consumers going to be able to get their games back? Is it just going to continue to force folks out of the pay TV system? What do you think?
yeah, I can kick it off, so to speak. But basically, with respect to Disney, I think they're geniuses, because ultimately, if you were unable to experience a game watching it on your service of DirecTV or an AT&T legacy user, you did have the opportunity through Hulu to add the ESPN Plus package where you could engage in the game. So ultimately, the same household's paying twice for Disney, both on a service that's not coming through their normal MVPD traditional way, and now you're paying for it through that wonderful ESPN added package to watch a game. So I think they were either really clever or it just worked out that way circumstantially. But I think they're certainly winning on that side of it. I'm sure there'll be a lot of dollars driven towards them as we look at this situation happening.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on the carriage disputes? Go ahead, Bryan.
No, I was just going to say, just echoing what Marc said. I mean, as a consumer, trying to watch sports is a mess right now. I mean, just flat out, it's almost impossible to just understand where every game is, especially with the fragmented rights with the NFL, the biggest sports league in America. The Friday night game, that's the one that was on Peacock, I believe. And I remember going to the NFL website, and normally it's pretty good about, if a game's on Fox or CBS or whatever, they have a big marquee saying this is where you can watch it, or NFL Network, whatever the carrier is. And they really didn't have a big Peacock logo saying, hey, go get a Peacock subscription to watch this Friday night game. It was, if you've got NFL, Plus, you can watch it on their service. So there's this fight between the carriers who have this value in live news, sports, and other entertainment that gets people to sort of stick with their subscription, and the sports leagues who want as much viewership as possible. And I don't honestly know where it's going to shake out, but I feel like the major sports leagues, at the very least, have to ultimately figure out how to get their product directly to consumers. And I look at MLB as sort of my best example. It's been for many years now very simple to get an MLB subscription directly through MLB. The technology is getting easier and easier to actually provide these services. They get to keep all the money rather than splitting fees with a carrier. But the problem is you have to build an audience, right? You can't just say, hey, we're on Amazon Prime now. 80% of Americans can just watch this with their subscription or whatever their sort of, penetration rate is. And they're not going to get billions of dollars in upfront advances from these networks, but they might actually work out better in the long run by getting to keep more of that revenue, building a better engagement with their fans instead of having to go Peacock to NBC to Hulu to whatever to watch various games. It's a mess right now.
Yeah. Go ahead, friend.
Well, I don't have a huge horse in this race at all. Honestly, sports really isn't my big thing. But I mean, looking at what you guys were just saying, sort of from a sort of broader level, is the problem that they're trying to kind of reverse into this new environment with a lot of like legacy rules and expectations? To your point about MLB, right? Having, however you want to describe it, the courage, the audacity, the stupidity, or whatever it is, right, to go out and be their own brand, their own logo, their own platform, right? It does make a lot of sense. And I would argue that something like sports is one place where you can do that versus other areas, because it's probably the easiest to find your audience because you've already really got them and bring them to you, and then figure out how to charge them for it. Because the problem with it otherwise, is speaks to a bigger problem, I think, in the streaming ecosystem. There's something that I know that Marc and Bryan Reynolds here will be a lot more equipped to talk about, which is that you've got a lot of people taking big chunks out of a very small pie, which doesn't work, especially in something I could imagine like sports, where big numbers are expected, but in streaming by more people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. One other thing related to that on the user experience level, and this way, Fred can also comment. None of the experiences are the same, regardless if it's Amazon, Peacock, or Hulu. So if somebody's been in a traditional linear household where you might be used to a DVR experience, or you choose to watch games kind of at your pace and on your timetable, this might be me being a terrible user, not understanding, but on this past Monday night, you had a certain window of time where you had to watch the game. And unlike Amazon, who I think has the superior service, on the Hulu experience, it doesn't give you the immediate option to watch the game from the beginning. You can only watch live. So if you want to watch from the beginning, you actually have to engage from live and then not look, and then kind of reverse it on the on your remote. But it also times out. So at a certain time, it's not there. You lose the game, and you can lose the last quarter. You have another modern day Heidi experience thanks to our streaming technology. Heidi being the reference, I'm sure everyone can look that up on Google. They understand the NFL and Heidi. But
I thought you were talking about my wife.
No.
You don't want to have
a great
Heidi
story,
experience.
but I don't want to bore you with it. It's where the NFL basically back in the day, they cut away from the end of a very close football game to I think it was NBC, but it was to the network movie Heidi that they were airing that night. So they literally cut away from a live sport event so Heidi could be broadcast. But meanwhile, though, when you come back to looking at Peacock, Hulu, and Amazon, who are the new big players in the space, each of the experiences are different. And I think ultimately we need to kind of optimize that as well for the consumer to ultimately find their way there.
Yeah, definitely. One thing that I thought was interesting was I was looking at the numbers for viewing on the Peacock game specifically, because when we talk about the pain of the sports experience and everything being fragmented and trying to figure out where your games are and where to watch matches and stuff, really difficult. But the Peacock game had 14.2 million viewers of the Peacock game, which was about double the regular season game that they did last year. So they had a playoff game, I think, too, that wouldn't really be comparable, but they did a Bills-Chargers game last year. So that either means, A, people are finding it easier to figure this out and hop into those services. B, Packers and Eagles are just a better game than the Bills-Chargers. I don't know. Or also maybe that Peacock's benefited a little bit of coming right off the Olympics. So they've got probably subscriptions at a pretty big high because they just got this boost of people coming up, and then they're rolling right into NFL season. What do you think?
And also off of that, thinking of other sports, the WNBA is a little trickier to find when you get outside of the NFL, as you start to find more of these very targeted sports audiences. As that starts to become more popular, or certainly did become more popular this year, that too is another experience of you've got to do your homework to know if you're going to be able to have access to watch a game that you're interested in, never mind a local team. The idea here, Fred, is that if you're in a local market, you should be able to enjoy your local team, but that's not necessarily the case given what's happening with a lot of these contracts throughout different sports.
And also, like, putting the sort of the advertiser hat on. Sorry, this is a dog over here that I'm doing with. Like, speaking from the advertiser perspective, right? Again, you have, the way that local anything local, anything hyper local is being represented in streaming is like 1% of the potential right now. And then, so when you look at sports and local football teams, local college teams, and the local pizza shop down the street, you know, and the things that they could do to get on the map and coattail off, you know, this what might be, you know, a tiny following on a national basis, but is everything that matters to that community. You know, if you again take like the MLB approach, which I love because we do, you know, do have a lot of interesting and fun discussions with those guys. Like the world completely changes, you know, sort of creatively and opportunity wise, because, you know, you're in your own universe. And from there, it's much easier to kind of use all of those benefits of being able to speak to people on TV, you know, like in those communities, in those towns. And with the much, much larger services, that's just not a conversation that's going to happen like so easily or so quickly. And it's probably not going to mean so much to them either, you know, meaning that it's just going to sort of get kicked down the road.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I was going to ask how the advertising landscape is kind of fitting awkwardly onto, again, this real fragmentation in sports. But there's a lot more besides MLB Plus, a lot more individual teams having their own services now. I know that Barcelona, think about other football, international football, Barcelona, Liverpool, I think have their own streaming services. Here in Real Madrid. In Texas, the Stars just made a deal to, you know, with all the hullabaloo with the regional sports networks and issues there, that they are going to stream every single one of their games live for free through a streaming app. And it's going to be completely ad-based and no subscription whatsoever for those in their local, like 4-state area, basically. So then you're talking all about advertising, all about that local community and that fan experience, Fred.
Yeah, which I think is a tremendous opportunity. The only challenge remaining, which you can see, you know, today, which even I saw last night while I was streaming a certain 90-minute discussion that was going on between people, is that the service I was watching it on, you know, was filling most of the intermissions with a slate, right? Like, you know, when something is live, it's a very different situation, and it takes a lot of thinking about and a lot of thought and deals up front. And as long as they've got the chops to do that and the right people to work with to do that, then I think they'd have a lot of luck. But you know, but otherwise, I mean, switching something like that to being entirely ad supported, it's a great way to grow, probably to grow an interest in that sport, and you know, in that particular sort of niche of whatever it is you do. I don't know.
Yeah. So let's switch our focus a little bit from, we keep talking about sports all day, but let's stay with advertising. There's so much happening, so much innovation happening in the ad-based streaming world, whether we're talking about free ad-based services, whether we're talking about advertising tiers on subscription services, which we're seeing growing, of course. Let's talk about maybe Marc, starting with you here, the idea of FAST gaining a little bit more traction globally. Is that something that you're seeing? I think that you know, obviously we saw the SVOD business model kind of go global first, and are we starting to get outside of the US with the FAST model now?
Yes, each market is a little bit unique, but there's definitely a handful of markets now that are absolutely in the space and starting to see monetization that is meaningful enough for getting other people in. They've been talking about it for the last 2 years, as we have in this market and in Canada as well. But I think you're finally seeing a lot of companies turn the corner on this. You know, there's some inherent challenges, like when you look at the UK, given how free broadcasting and stacking works, that the people can readily access a lot of the content that they may already, you know, want to see for free versus a fast channel, another way of seeing it. But we are seeing some movements in very specific territories in Europe, some of the English-speaking markets, definitely in LATAM and Brazil's coming on. And the CPMs are going from, you know, basement level, you know, thresholds where they were just, again, 2 years ago, to things that are starting to show a little bit of life. So, you know, we always want to follow that and be there to service those markets. And we're starting to see things that are meaningful. And then having a local presence and having a local team you can interact with on that particular platform's really critical to kind of getting that set up. We had a channel that does okay here. It's very competitive space. But we brought it into Australia and it popped up and it's in the top 3 out of their 50 channels they service on FAST currently. And so there was definitely an opportunity to find new audiences and new markets and new life for, a lot of the different FAST channels that we may have here. But you really have to be strategic about it and judicious where you're going to, place those bets.
Yeah. Is FAST kind of especially as you get to new markets, a little bit of a race to get there first and establish an audience? I mean, there's so many more channels that are being layered on that sort of, really fragments the audience of who's watching any individual channel. So maybe some advantage of getting into a market first and establishing that viewership.
That's right.
Yeah. And the audience
is, Bryan and then Fred.
Right. And depending on what territory you're in, the audience and what the sort of type of content they want to see can be vastly different, right? So we see what works in the US because the market's a little more established. And then you try to put up the same channel in Latin America or Australia, and it doesn't have the same performance. And it's not just a population function, it's that they're looking for different types of content. So that's a challenge that obviously, Marc and the folks at Cineverse are constantly dealing with all the FAST channels that they manage. But to zoom out just a little bit to generic AVOD, not just FAST channels, the international market is certainly a humongous opportunity for, obviously ourselves and what Cineverse does, and probably many of the people listening that are Ott.X members that are independent content providers. We're starting to see the platforms like Tubi get into Australia, Latin America, the UK, the rest of Western Europe. And for folks like us, that's huge because, we have international rights for most of our content. There's content that we can acquire for international that's easier to get than US rights that are locked up by big studios many times. And as we start seeing those CPMs, like Marc said, get to a reasonable level where the monetization makes sense, that you're not just putting your content up for free, it's great for us because we're looking at it and saying, hey, if we can make more money on Tubi in Australia than Amazon Prime is paying us in the US because of the ridiculous way that they do their rates, we'll take that all day. I mean, that's just a win for us. So we're sitting here hoping that we can help push that international expansion for the Rokus and Tubis and Plutos and Zumos of the world, because that's just a big opportunity to expand the user base, to generate more revenue, and to get our content in front of more people.
I think you just made such a I had a real sort of aha moment, like listening to what you just said this minute, Bryan, because, if the sort of the general proverb, right, which is where the US leads, the rest of the world follows, like, 6 months later. Are you serious? Out. Streaming is one of them, 100%. And for the last 4 years plus, I would say, since streaming really took its place in the world, right, as the predominant form of entertainment at home, we've been waiting for the rest of the world to have that catch-up moment. And it has taken a long time. To Marc's point, right, what we call, Freeview back home, back in the UK, like, is so good that, even then when I do my annual obligatory trip home to see mum, like, she turns on Freeview and it's that, right? Yeah, she's old, but a lot of people, young people, still, because it is so good. But it is changing. The other markets are changing. We, a lot of our agency clients and brand clients, are every single day talking more and more about what can we do north of the border, what can we do south of the border, all the way down to the tip of South America, and we also do get, requests and discussions about what we can do in Europe and APAC. And all of these were chats that really didn't happen a year ago or 2 years ago. So what's really nice, I think, what I'm trying to say there is, all of these things need fuel and funding. And actually there is that some of the advertising-based fuel and funding is now beginning to be siphoned off and going into these new markets. But the thing that I think has me really excited about the potential here, which is relevant, I think, to probably a lot of the people in at Ott.X membership audience, and certainly the other you two here, is it's become such a cluster F here in the US, right, to be found, seen, and for your content to, quite frankly, be perceived for the value it should, and for it to get the exposure, for you to get the revenue you deserve, because it's just so full. But like, cut your teeth here and then aim to be quick over there, knowing that we have tipped over into there being these markets, and go into these green pastures with everything that you've learned here, and stick your flag in, now, right, before everyone else comes along. And maybe that's exactly what's needed. Maybe the future for some people here isn't necessarily in the United States.
Yeah, that's super interesting. One story oh, go ahead.
Yeah, no, just it's a really like sort of fairly ethereal and nebulous thought, but honestly, like, maybe there is something there.
Yeah. One thing that strikes me as maybe being more important internationally too, when folks are taking their services international, is, in the US, when we think about mobile viewing of streaming services, a lot of times there's a lot of conversations dominant for younger viewers doing a lot of their viewing on mobile versus TV. We know that, a lot of consumers internationally are mobile first, depending on what market that you're looking at. I saw that Vizio's Watch Free Plus, their free ad-based AVOD streaming app, they're just expanding to mobile, so that you can watch, free ad-based streaming on mobile too. So do you feel like that's an even more important thing in international markets, or, got to be on the normal CTV to the TV platform first?
Well, in India, right, isn't something like 98% of shows consumed on a mobile? I mean, or I've made that stat up, but it's like,
sounds right. Yeah.
Sounds right. Yeah, stamp of approval there.
Yeah, sounds right.
I would say that's a valid thought. I don't know.
Yeah, and whether it's international or domestic, you look at just the demographic and the age sort of gap on where content's viewed. If we're looking 10 years in the future, you have to be able to get those folks that are teenagers or young adults now interested in your content, or aware of how to consume it, or build an audience for marketers to sell ads to. And that's what's happening. And I think that's a good point you just brought up, Jennifer, is that regardless of what device or what the method of delivery is, if you can get your content early into those markets, I think you can, like Fred said, you can sort of stake a claim there and potentially do better than you're doing in a very saturated, competitive US market, where CPMs are, better than other places, but there's just so much, content. There's thousands of fast channels. There's hundreds of thousands of pieces of content on services like Amazon Prime, and you're competing with, Netflix, and it's a very difficult market to navigate.
Yeah. I like the landscape of mobile, but really to meet the social networks where they live, right? So it's to bring our game to them to a degree. I don't think there's I don't know how much long form content will be on mobile unless it's used as a vehicle to watch it ultimately on your living room experience. As we've seen with YouTube, YouTube dominates the platform experience, but a lot of people are watching the content on YouTube on their TVs, and not necessarily, at least in the US, and not on their mobile device. But I like going after, we know where the behavior is, we know where the consumption is, right? So if these short form videos on TikTok and Instagram shorts are really dominating the hours of the consumption, we need to bring our game there, and we are a little bit, right? So just as an illustration from the Cineverse point of view, we have a partner who's been distributing on our primarily YouTube channel for the Dog Whisperer, but we're also on Facebook, the older person's social platform. But it's delivering. It's getting short pieces of content that are extractions out of the full show, but there are full shows available as well, and people are checking it out. So it's very important, I think, all of us to be thinking about how do we bring, our game, our content, our AVOD to these platforms, to find, make sure we're hitting Gen Z and millennials, and where they're spending most of their time anyway. And then ultimately, we think they'll evolve and find their way for long form binging on the living room.
Yeah. All right. One other big kind of hot topic, timely topic on the ad space is around political ads. So obviously there's usually a big boom in spending political ads at this time in the cycle. There was a a debate of sorts last night. Can't claim I watched it. But other people did, and when you talk about to your clients, Fred, maybe starting with you there about the advertisers, right, and where they're placing their money. What's the kind of sense of the advertising world around advertising right now, and also are there any kind of innovations that you're seeing when it comes to what candidates are doing and the ads that are being placed to try and reach the folks they're trying to reach?
Can I start with this one, just Please. Because I mean it's 25.5 out of 24 hours of my day right now, and has been quite a lot actually since the beginning of the year. Where Origin has tried since 2020 to be relevant, in an election season, we have failed up until this year. And this year, everything changed. It started really when we put out a national survey. We decided to ask 7,000 households what they do and don't like about political ads that they see in the living room, and how they could be different in a way that might actually sway them as a voter and all this kind of thing. And it became a source of intelligence that absolutely changed the game for us. And so what I can share about what we learned from that survey, let alone everything else, is to answer your question around how are candidates thinking and feeling differently. One, it's generally understood that these elections are going to be won or lost at a very, very local level by handfuls of hundreds or thousands of votes. That's the first thing. And so sort of like segueing from that, what we have learned is two things are now really being discussed by agencies, our political agency clients who are now starting to launch all of their campaigns, or we're starting to launch them for them, is that they want their messaging to speak to that viewer in order to actually get their attention and hopefully win their decision. But also there is a huge amount of desire for political advertisers to try to avoid running back to back against other political advertisers, not just an opponent, but anything political. So it's actually causing an interesting challenge in the space. People don't want to run their ads on the basis that they may be just crammed full of a pod full of others. And that's where, while we were pitching lots of different ways that we could help, the way that's been adopted the most is the one that has surprised us the most, which is they want to run, we're running their ads against something that's completely irrelevant and actually nothing to do with the election, just little native content snippets that we make, right? Like they're palate cleansers, if you will. And that is proving to be something that they really, really want. They want to feel like they're in a cleaner environment. But the other thing I'll say, and I'm sure, Bryan and Marc, or anyone who looks at how their revenue has been faring the last few months, the political season kicked off very, very late this year, really, really worryingly late this year. And it's still nowhere near full tilt. And so there is going to be a massive, massive, tsunami of cash that is going to turn up any minute. And that's going to make life very, very difficult for people. And a lot of people are going to have to change their strategies and their plans. Streaming services who are very much against politics are going to get FOMO, and they're going to have to figure out how to take some of this money. And the candidates and causes and agencies like us who are running the media are going to hope that they do, in order to make sure that we can reach enough audiences without the prices being ridiculous, because then actually nobody wins. So it's a very different year this year. And I think that we've not really seen the start of it.
That's so interesting to think about is the number one issue, thinking about the storm coming, right, of money that's about to hit, and especially for certain pockets, right, of states that matter, let's say, or local, right, is the number one issue that consumers tell us in our surveys that they have with the ad experience in streaming is overfrequency.
Yeah.
Seeing the same ad repeating too many times, and the election ads, like the worst offenders, you see them over and over and over, 100%. Right? So it's interesting that you're saying, well, hey, we're seeing a lot of uptake of, at least we're not, even if that ad might be playing over and over, you're
that's
enveloped by other content. Yeah, totally. I will blame Brad.
No, actually, we will not have that. I'm currently the victim. I'm currently suffering or having negative sentiment towards a brand, not politics, but I'm getting a certain ad for a certain pharma brand every single, ad break when I turn on TV. We really care about this and we won't. But therefore, it's actually making delivering in full really difficult, because the last thing we want to do is not deliver in full for our client, because the last thing the client wants to do is have to give that money back. Right. Like it will shake itself out. But that is, I think I just didn't want to sort of we're not here to talk about our own products, right, any more than we need to. It is one of the reasons why I think Origin finally got put on the map for politics this year, because we actually deal with a huge part of that problem. No one ever has to show the same thing twice if they're working with us. That's really, really critical, and we'll see how it plays out. But yeah, Marc, sorry, you were also going to say something meaningful.
No, never meaningful, but you have to navigate the space a little bit uniquely in our category, because we have a major platform out there who won't take any political ads, who know who they are, right? So it forces everyone into the other places. And then we have a lot of channel deals where players are very specific about, somehow political advertising is the same as dangerous products. Like it came into this no-fly area or no-fly zone. And there are occasions where people are very particular and prescriptive about, I don't want any advertising on this side of the fence. Yes. You're okay with the other, but I don't want to see one ad. So it starts to get to a little bit difficult to manage. And
That's
you have to kind of navigate those waters a little bit uniquely. And then don't forget about I wouldn't call our business nascent anymore, but if you look at podcasting ads, I mean, you can listen to podcasts, you're going to get like this. They repeat and repeat, whether they're the red ads or not. So there's some more sophistication needed. And lastly, and I don't know who's responsible for it, but I have been inundated with text ads asking me for yet another $5. Just $5 will do this and that and the other. I've reported so many of these spam. I mean, I'm talking about I'm not exaggerating, at least 50 or 60 of these texts that have come through in the last month or so. They're definitely reaching me, but they're getting me, they're going to sway me one way or the other out of being irritated. So there's a lot of different lenses with respect to political ads. There's the marketplace that we have to kind of look at, how to funnel the money properly. 2 is to be less restrictive. There should be, I mean, we're not even at the point where we're doing all the propositions or anything else coming up yet.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to be flooding in. And then, I think it's a concern only because what's coming, what happens now in December, after the holiday ads, are we going to be in a big hole as an industry come the beginning of 2025? I don't know yet.
I hope not. I mean, honestly, because one of the things that sort of it came about because I was trying to figure out how to use one of my early fall photographs yesterday to do a graphic, right, for the company. And actually what it was talking about is a fall is coming, like what's coming with it. And, and it struck me that we know that a lot of advertisers outside of political pull back during an election season for 2 predominant reasons. 1, they don't want to compete on the rates. And 2, they don't want their logos being seen next to anything political, right? And, and I think that both of those are understandable, but again, it's a mistake. And I think that some of the more savvy agencies who are representing a lot of these brands will see that there are safe ways to do this, which hopefully means that once we're on the other side, it's still business as usual, because the timing for an election is awful. They really need to go back and rethink this, right? We've got Halloween, we've got leading people up to, Thanksgiving and Black Friday, Cyber Monday, Christmas, for crying out loud. Most of our brand clients want months of build up for all of this stuff, but they then feel like maybe we can't until this thing's over. So now we've got to squeeze it all in here. And then we're going to be so knackered by Christmas, we're going to stop. And then Q1 will be even worse than a regular Q1. I think most of these sort of feelings and emotions have happened at least once before. And so now, instead of people being reactive and panicking, the one thing that we are 100% seeing is actually taking some risk and finding people, partners that you trust. And we're very proud to be trusted by some very, very, very cool, very big brands and their agencies, and actually pushing through, using what's available to them to take some risk and take a different approach. That has definitely been happening. I don't think we're all the way there, but I would say that, you know, this will probably be hopefully it'll feel like a more normal December maybe than historically. I that would be my prediction right now.
All right. Bryan, anything else to add before I'm going to jump to a totally new topic? So you
Sure.
get to wrap up on
I'll
ad
just
dates if you want.
throw my button on it, just to say that, you know, I think Fred and Marc really crushed this one, so I have nothing substantive to add, but I just will hope that this sort of political season, the way that Fred talked about, this deluge of money coming in, sort of breaks this spell of sort of suppressed CPMs that we've seen, and sort of gets us set up for next year in a way that, you know, some of these CPMs go back to where they were, you know, a couple of years ago. It would be great for all of our, you know, content providers like us that rely on the ad money.
And I mean, these elections, I know, Jen, we need to go, but like election season, a single major election season, so putting the midterms aside, like these, I'll be totally transparent. For Origin, it sets up our war chest for years to come till the next big season. You know, like it's really important. And that's why I think, you know, people aren't sleeping so well at night right now, because they can't predict. It's not just, nothing's business as usual. Nothing's normal. I mean, nothing's been normal for what, almost a decade, but we still don't really like that, you know? So, Bryan, I mean, I think we all need, I think it will happen. I just think we're all going to wake up one morning and go, oh shit, we're really rich. I think that's possibly where we're going to go. But the people on the media owner side, they need to get ready to be very, very proactive, not reactive.
Yeah. Okay. So final quick hit of some news that I saw that was super interesting. Wanted to get your take on, and then we'll wrap up with the lightning round and head out. Is really the topic of what makes a good partner and bundles. So we've been talking for like years about the death of the, you know, traditional bundle with internet and pay TV and mobile and streamings, you know, the great new bundle for internet service providers. We did some work recently looking at all sorts of different other types of services, subscription economy, memberships that come into the house, whether that's music streaming, convenience delivery, diaper services, you know, all sorts of stuff, right? Even traditional things like AAA for the older users, and what could make interesting bundles. I saw two stories kind of come across on the out of the box partner, you know, landscape. One, set you up here, Marc, Cineverse, distributing on Spotify. So bringing the kind of music world and the video streaming world together. And then Max and DoorDash having a benefit together. We're seeing a little bit more of that kind of thing, the DoorDash, like delivery, T-commerce, you know, can I get a pizza during the game? Like, I'm really interested to understand what makes for a good partner, and whether you think these out of the box kind of partnerships and extra benefit bundles, like, is that real? What's substantial there? Maybe I'll go to Marc first, since I set you up with the Cineverse Spotify news.
Well, the Spotify is actually not necessarily a bundle, you know, by definition. Really, what it is, it was another distribution outpost, and it was an extension of where they already went with podcasting, right? So they obviously made a big play into audio podcasting. They evolved into video podcasting, and led by Joe Rogan and a lot of others who have now, you know, it's almost sort of the expectation of the podcasting industry that you'll need to have a video version of your podcast. And then we kind of said, well, let's jump that a little bit and see if we can put content in there, AVOD, and distribute, now that we've got people sort of expecting that there may be video available to them. We're working with them in this beta on discoverability. It doesn't work necessarily the same way that you would on a traditional type of video only kind of platform. So for that, it was just, as we always do, we like to put bets on a lot of tables. We want to be where the viewer consumers are going to be. We do a lot of at home. We do a lot with mobile. We do things like with audio partners like Spotify. That's what that is. And then you can come back around. We can talk about bundles.
Yeah, absolutely. Bryan, how about you when you think about who might be out there that could be interesting to work with.
I love the outside the box partnerships, and like you mentioned, the DoorDash, HBO Max thing, and the way that I think about it as a consumer, right? I work in this industry. We distribute to every AVOD, SVOD platform in the world. I subscribe to all of them, so I have some experience at least consuming them. And where it kind of gets crazy for me, I go back to like the sports analogy where you're trying to watch your games, you don't know what channel it is. It starts with like, depending on what credit card you have, you might have a free subscription to DoorDash or Postmates or whatever. And then all of a sudden you have that DoorDash subscription and you can get a Max subscription for free. But then you have a different credit card that gives you a free, gives you a huge discount on if you subscribe to Max for a full year ahead of time. So as a consumer, it gets really complicated because you're trying to min-max how much am I paying for all these services? And do I do the Disney bundle where I get everything for one price that's discounted, or do I use my free Hulu that I get with my Spotify subscription? And it just gets insane trying to rationalize where you have to go and juggling. I'm going to switch the payment next month to this card because I get something back. And that I think is going to have to get reined in a little bit. But we're in that mode right now where it's kind of like the wild, wild west of AVOD subscriptions, of all these sort of subscription services like the food deliveries and Ubers, where everyone's trying to value add to differentiate. Everyone's trying to make their customers have a reason to stick around. So if you don't use your DoorDash enough to justify the $100 a year subscription, if you're getting HBO for free on top of it, that's more than $100 a year. What's your reason for canceling? If you use either one of those sparingly, you're sort of coming out ahead. So I like where everyone's trying to figure out where this is going to work. And I think it's going to whittle itself down over the next coming years to a little bit more of a rational, partnership of like these different channels work with this product, this other service. But for now, as a consumer, it's half a fun game trying to figure out what the best way to attach yourself to these services is, and it's half frustrating because it's so complicated.
Right.
I had like 63 thoughts while you were just talking, Bryan, and like I think if you take the Max and DoorDash example, right, everyone, I think the first thing that feels like it's not been baked out is between them, who is it actually for? Right? Is it for Max or is it for DoorDash? Like, is it for the brand? Is it for the streaming service? I feel like in a weird way, that's not really necessarily been ironed out. But what I will say as an advertiser, the reason I absolutely love that example is because if you really took that simple premise and took a lot of mushrooms and stretched what you could do with that same concept out of the box, that brand, the DoorDash, so looking at it from the DoorDash side, which is the way I would in this instance, because I'm not a publisher, I'm an advertiser, they've just found their reason not to have to advertise on Max anymore, because they are a built-in part of that experience, which is awareness for those who don't use DoorDash. It is easy ordering for those who do. And then all of the fun stuff that comes within it, right? Like, whether you're going to start putting scavenger hunts into the shows in order to get a free burrito or whatever it is. Like, there is so much you can do, because the one thing that I think, and I'm saying this probably 5 years uncomfortably ahead of when it might start becoming a discussion, is brands really need to think about better ways of putting themselves on TV than buying 20 and 40-foot shipping containers, right? Like traditional advertising in the traditional style, actually speaking on behalf of the brands who basically pay most of our bills, it doesn't work the way that it used to. Like they have much, much greater needs now. Performance actually matters. Outcomes actually matter, as does finding a sufficient and a sustainable way of being relevant somewhere. And I think the idea of partnering with a channel is just the beginning of that Pandora's box getting opened up.
And it all leads to the Chick-fil-A streaming service.
It does lead to the Chick-fil-A streaming service, which, Marc, we're going to have to come back to you on other bundles another time. And we're going to have to dig into the Pandora's box that Fred just brought up another time, because we've got to bring this webcast to a close with a lightning round. So the lightning round conversation is all about Chick-fil-A. So Chick-fil-A, did recently announce that they are coming out with a streaming service, content themselves. So quick hit from each of you before we go. What are the prospects for a Chick-fil-A streaming service, family-friendly frontrunner or streaming foul? What do you think? FOWL there.
I'm waiting for the Taco
Okay.
Bell horror streaming service personally.
Yes, awesome. Okay, so Bryan, that's first. So you're just opting out of Chick-fil-A totally, going for Taco Bell.
Yeah, I'm gonna wait for the other fast food companies to come out with their competing services and see which one I like better.
Yeah,
Awesome.
I'm gonna agree with Bryan on that, because actually the only fast food I see lines is for In-N-Out. That's the one where people wait an hour to just, and I don't think it's everywhere in the United States. It's very regional, but that service could be something of a hit because of the fact it has this groundswell of fan base. But ultimately, these are tricky because platforms do still engage in church and state between sponsored shows and programming and now a channel versus the sort of implied sponsorship, whether or not it's a real one or not. So I think there's going to be some inherent challenges, and ultimately a platform may say, we'd love to carry your channel, but you're going to pay us X amount for us to carry that. That's a paid placement.
Interesting. Fred?
I think that it is going to be interestingly successful for a period of time in its own way, putting aside all the grown-up reasons that Marc gave that may very well turn out to be a problem for them. Like I think that it may very well be, they may very well receive a lot of first mover advantage, where, if you go back to the days where, like, let's say TV Plus was still 18 years old, they were out there begging people for channels, right? Like, this could be another new interesting thing that could get some good PR, and it may be successful depending on what the programming is. But for the next person to follow after them, I don't think that will necessarily say the same thing. It could be a little bit like the sort of the Coinbase QR code Super Bowl scenario. We've done it. Screw you, like no one else can now because we got all the magic dust ourselves. But the long-term play, I don't know. I think that could be a tricky one.
Yep. Awesome. Well, thank you, gentlemen, for an awesome conversation today. I loved hearing your takes on what's hot and relevant in the news. And Ott.X, thanks very much for hosting us.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks, y'all. That was terrific. I feel like that could go on for quite a while longer. And it was nice of Fred to join us from, I think you've been in like a million far-flung locations since I saw you last, and yet here you are. You're back in your bedroom, your living room, whatever that is, and survived all of those adventures.
Yeah, no, I got lost in South America for a month, but luckily they let me leave.
Well, you're back now for more important things, solving today's streaming industry issues. Honestly, it's like, I feel like I've heard the word Wild Wild West since I first started doing anything basically in tech, all the way back in about 1992, when most of you were knee-high to a grasshopper, or maybe not even that. So I guess maybe there's no end in sight for the Wild Wild West. Maybe we need a new analogy after that, but yeah, thanks a lot for laying some truth on us. It's super interesting, and I guess there's no solution yet in sight for me not being able to figure out what to watch or where to watch it from the myriad of services that keep expanding. So I'm just gonna have to start adding Chick-fil-A to the mix, I guess.
I will say one thing though, Eric. Like, I love being the consumer in this industry, and I will just share for anyone that's remaining. Like, I am personally now so affronted by the cost of like the subscriptions that we don't have, as much as it's getting me this much closer to a divorce every time. Every single one of our subscriptions that offers an ad-supported tier, we take.
Yeah, it's a good point. We all got used to, and it sure was great in around 2001 or 2 or whenever it was, when you didn't have to watch ads anymore. Ads are dead.
Yeah, no way.
Wow, I don't know. The industry has found a way to like screw all of that up, and now we have to watch ads or pay through the teeth to get content. I don't know. I think I'm gonna just watch the Super 8 movies of my family when I
Yeah,
was
but with movies coming back, at least some of the ads are entertainment ads and maybe more engaging and interesting. So
It's
Yeah.
true.
Oh.
That's why we went to see Beetlejuice last night.
there you go.
Yeah.
Same, yeah.
And
And then
I won't say.
and then Fred, are you available to deconstruct BritBox episodes later on?
Yeah,
Great.
100%.
Thank you guys.
Hey, thanks a lot, everybody.
Thanks,
Jennifer,
everybody.
Bryan, Fred, and Marc for that deep dive into the enticing yet murky waters of streaming today. We're going to be back again with our next episode of The Buzz on October 9th. So you can register to attend that and future episodes from our website. You can always find us. You may not be able to find your cricket match, but you can always find OTTX and The Buzz at OTTX.org. And our podcasts are out on Spotify. I hope you'll join us and invite your friends and colleagues to get in on The Buzz as well. That concludes today's episode of The Buzz. I want to remind everybody about the OTTX Summit. It's one of our flagship events. It's taking place in LA on September 25th and 26th. Many of those that you saw today will be there, as well as a bunch of other folks that are all about making the streaming industry work for our businesses and for the world. Be there or be square. We have 2 days of conference programming, workshops, breakout sessions, exhibitor booths, one-on-one business meetings, industry cocktail parties, and all of the accoutrements. So you can find out about this at OTTX.org. And until next time, we will see you all soon. Thanks, everyone. Happy streaming.
thanks, Eric.